What is thoracic outlet syndrome? Thoracic outlet syndrome, also known as TOS, is when the nerves and blood vessels within the thoracic region, which is pretty much the chest and the shoulder, becomes compressed, which then results in pain in the neck, the shoulders, and tingling in the fingers as well. This means that the muscles, the fascia, or the bones within the thoracic region is one way or another creating some kind of compression on your nerves and blood vessels, resulting in your pain. But that's not the only place that you can get TOS pain. Another area is going to be the neck region, which is going to be the scalenes. And the reason why is because the nerves and blood vessels, they come directly out of the spine through the scalenes and into the thoracic region. Meaning your shoulder pain, neck pain, all the way to your finger pain can all be created thanks to the compression in your neck and not necessarily the thoracic region. And sadly, there is another spot that most people miss, and that is going to be the arm, the deep bicep muscle, also known as the coracobrachialis. This is a deep shoulder muscle, technically, that is located more on the arm more than anything. And again, there's nerves and blood vessels that run right behind this muscle, meaning if it gets tight in one way or another, it can create some kind of TOS-like pain. So how is thoracic outlet syndrome created? Now, since TOS is created by compression on the nerves and blood vessels in the thoracic region, you have to ask yourself, what necessarily makes those muscles and the fascia create compression in the first place, which makes it then squeeze on the nerves and blood vessels? Or another way to put it is, what makes those muscles shorten, or what makes them tight to the point they're creating compression? And before I give you that answer, let's just take a quick look at what the doctors say according to the Mayo Clinic. Common causes of thoracic outlet syndrome include trauma from a car accident, for example, repetitive injuries from a job or sports, or even pregnancy. Now, what does getting into an accident, having repetitive injuries from a job or sports, and a pregnancy all have in common? And that is, they can all create some kind of compression, obviously, right? But how is that happening? Well, when you get into a car accident, what ends up happening to your body ends up happening to those wounds. They end up having scar tissue over it, which one is not elastic and doesn't allow any flexibility, but two, pulls all the tissues together, creating some kind of compression and tightness within the muscles and the tissues around it, like the fascia. Now, repetitive injuries like typing on a computer, playing a violin, or something like that, all that, again, creates some kind of small little micro traumas within the muscles, which then become small little adhesions, almost like mini little scars that are way easier to release. And even pregnancy can create some kind of compression thanks to fluid retention, which then presses against the nerves and blood vessels. Weight gain, the same issue, and even breast enlargements, which again, being on the thoracic region area, can create some kind of compression because you have more weight there pulling forward, creating that tightness and pain. But if you ask me, the biggest factor for thoracic outlet syndrome is going to be your bad posture. Having something like forward head posture or rounded shoulders like this, it is all creating some kind of compression in the front of the body. And if you stay like that all day long, then that's just 8 to 10 hours of you creating that compression. And over years and years of doing this, not only will your posture form that way, but your muscles in the front will shorten, the muscles in the back will lengthen and get tight. And sadly, you don't feel the front of the body, you feel the tightness in the back of the neck, you feel that tightness in the upper back, and all that different pain that comes from there, when truly it's coming from here. Now you may be asking, how do bones actually create some kind of compression on the nerves and blood vessels? And the way that happens is, again, thanks to muscles and fascia. Over time, muscles, once again, like those neck scaling muscles, they attach to the first and second rib. And if they get shorn and tight thanks to overuse, they will pull those first ribs up, which then creates some kind of compression on the nerves and blood vessels between them and the clavicle. Or you can just have the tiny little subclavius pulling down on the clavicle, creating some kind of compression and squeezing them between the nerves and blood vessels. Regardless if it's bones or muscles themselves, the answer is most likely the muscles and the fascia is creating some kind of compression. Oh, but we're not done yet, because another reason for thoracic outlet syndrome is going to be what's called trigger points. We talked about this a little bit earlier, but a trigger point is pretty much a fascia restriction, a small little knot inside of a muscle that not only makes the muscle tighter and shorter, but it also creates pain in different areas of the body. Meaning having a trigger point somewhere maybe in the pec major, an area that doesn't come near your nerves and blood vessels and cannot create some kind of compression, it can still make it feel like you have TOS-like pain by creating what's called referral pain into the arm, into the fingers and all that, when truly that pain is coming from a little spot in the chest. And then finally, you can also have something like an abnormal rib, like an extra rib that is just something you're born with and is creating that kind of compression on the nerves and blood vessels. Now, if you have ever been diagnosed with thoracic outlet syndrome, then there's probably 3 or maybe multiple that you've been diagnosed with the first one being neurogenic TOS. And I'm just going to read off the symptoms real quick of what you normally feel with these, because I always mix them up, which is why I got the references. Basically, whenever your nerves are the ones that are mainly getting compressed, thanks to the tightness, thanks to whatever, then you're probably going to feel something like tingling in the fingers, weakness, things like that, like electricity, maybe even a little bit of burning in the arms, in the shoulder, in the fingers. And this kind of pain is usually aggravated the more you're doing repetitive movements that lift the arm up, like playing an instrument, for example. The next step is going to be venous thoracic outlet syndrome. And again, this is just when the subclavian vein is getting compressed, which then leads to all different kind of problems like swelling, heaviness in the arm, and maybe even your arm turning a little bit blue because we're now cutting off some blood flow. And similar to that one is going to be arterial TOS, which is the rarest but also the most dangerous here. And again, if this one is compressed, then you're going to get reduced blood flow to the arm, making it pain, making it cold, making it blue, and even in severe cases can create something like gangrene because there's no more nutrients, no more blood flow to the limb. Who is at risk for getting thoracic outlet syndrome? Well, for starters, it's going to be any kind of athlete that does some sort of overhead repetitive motion. You can be a tennis player swinging down, a baseball player, a swimmer. Those are all very common examples. But basically anything that creates some kind of repetitive movement going over, or maybe even just forward, for example, that right there is enough to create repetitive injuries, right? The microtrauma. And that can create some kind of compression. TOS can also be seen in people who do heavy lifting as a job and not necessarily in the gym. And the reason why they're kind of different here is because when you're in a gym and you're lifting heavy, normally you're doing heavy in the front and heavy in the back, right? You're lifting chest and you're also lifting back, almost like a 1-to-1 ratio for the front to back muscles. But when you do this as a job, most likely 8 to 10 hours a day, and you're not also seeing the gym or working out, then you're probably doing most of that lifting using the front of the body. And it's just something we really can't avoid too much. So you have all of this repetitive lifting getting stronger only on one side, which then creates a muscle imbalance towards that front, creates that compression, and makes those other muscles in the back very weak. And of course, like I talked about earlier, anyone who plays a musical instrument, I've seen a lot of people like that, business owners, and just people who have bad posture in general, are most likely going to be at risk for developing something like TOS. What kind of questions do you have for your TOS? Let me know in the comment section and I might just make a video about it.